Question 1. Investigation of a firearm license application in Puerto Rico. What is the most appropriate and legally compliant method for assessing the applicant's eligibility according to the Ley de Armas de Puerto Rico? Option A. Accept verbal assurances from the applicant or informal confirmations from acquaintances regarding their suitability to carry a weapon, without requiring official documentation. Option B. Expedite the application review based on a personal recommendation from a trusted source, bypassing some of the standard background checks to save time. Option C. Overlook minor administrative errors or omissions in the submitted documents, such as slightly outdated training certificates, if the applicant appears otherwise trustworthy. Option D. Conduct a comprehensive review of all submitted documentation, including criminal background checks, psychological evaluations, and proof of firearm safety training, ensuring strict compliance with the requirements outlined in the Ley de Armas de Puerto Rico. The correct answer is D. Conduct a comprehensive review of all submitted documentation, including criminal background checks, psychological evaluations, and proof of firearm safety training, ensuring strict compliance with the requirements outlined in the Ley de Armas de Puerto Rico. Explanation. Investigation of a firearm owner's license application in Puerto Rico presents a professionally challenging scenario due to the stringent requirements and the potential public safety implications of issuing a license. Careful judgment is required to ensure all legal prerequisites are met and that the applicant poses no undue risk. The best approach involves a thorough and documented review of the applicant's background, including any criminal history, mental health evaluations, and evidence of firearm safety training, all in strict adherence to the Ley de Armas de Puerto Rico, Law No. 168 of 2019, as amended. This approach is correct because it directly aligns with the legal mandate to verify an applicant's suitability and capacity to possess a firearm responsibly. The law explicitly outlines the documentation and checks required, such as a certificate of good conduct, a psychological evaluation, and proof of training, ensuring that only qualified individuals are granted a license. This systematic verification process minimizes the risk of firearms falling into the wrong hands, thereby upholding public safety and fulfilling the licensing authority's duty. An incorrect approach would be to expedite the review process based on a personal acquaintance with the applicant or a perceived lack of immediate threat, without completing all mandated background checks. This fails to comply with the Ley de Armas de Puerto Rico, which requires a comprehensive assessment regardless of personal relationships or subjective impressions. Such a failure constitutes a significant regulatory violation and an ethical lapse, as it bypasses critical safety protocols designed to protect the community. Another incorrect approach is to rely solely on a verbal confirmation of the applicant's eligibility from a previous jurisdiction or a casual conversation with a law enforcement officer, without obtaining official, documented verification. This is problematic because it lacks the necessary evidentiary support required by Puerto Rican law for license issuance. Official documentation is crucial for accountability and to ensure that the information is accurate and up-to-date, preventing potential legal challenges and ensuring consistent application of the law. A further incorrect approach involves overlooking minor discrepancies in the submitted documentation, such as incomplete training certificates or outdated psychological evaluations, with the assumption that they are not significant. This is unacceptable as the Ley de Armas de Puerto Rico specifies the exact nature and validity period for such documents. Overlooking these details undermines the integrity of the licensing process and could lead to the issuance of a license to an individual who no longer meets the required standards, posing a risk to public safety. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes strict adherence to the Ley de Armas de Puerto Rico. This involves meticulously following the established procedures for application review, ensuring all required documentation is present and valid, and conducting all mandated background checks. When in doubt about any aspect of an application or the interpretation of the law, seeking guidance from legal counsel or supervisory authorities within the licensing body is paramount. The ultimate goal is to balance the rights of individuals to possess firearms with the imperative to ensure public safety through rigorous and impartial application of the law. Question 2. Assessment of the necessary steps for an individual seeking to obtain a license to carry weapons in Puerto Rico. What is the most appropriate initial action to ensure compliance with the Puerto Rico Police Bureau's requirements? Option A. Proceed with the application for a license to carry weapons by only including a criminal background check and proof of identity, omitting other potentially burdensome requirements. Option B. Provide incomplete personal information on the application for a license to carry weapons to expedite the process, with the intention of correcting it later. Option C. Submit an application for a license to carry weapons without the mandatory mental health evaluation, assuming it is not a critical component. Option D. Diligently gather all required documentation as stipulated by the Puerto Rico Police Bureau for a license to carry weapons, including a completed application form, proof of identity, a criminal background check, and a mental health evaluation. The correct answer is D. Diligently gather all required documentation as stipulated by the Puerto Rico Police Bureau for a license to carry weapons, including a completed application form, proof of identity, a criminal background check, and a mental health evaluation. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires an applicant to navigate the specific legal requirements for obtaining a firearm license in Puerto Rico, which involves understanding the nuances of the application process and the types of information that are permissible to request and provide. Misinterpreting these requirements can lead to delays, denial of the license, or even legal repercussions. Careful judgment is required to ensure all documentation is accurate, complete, and compliant with Puerto Rico's laws regarding firearm ownership. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves diligently gathering all required documentation as stipulated by the Puerto Rico Police Bureau, Policía de Puerto Rico, for a license to carry weapons. This includes, but is not limited to, a completed application form, proof of identity, a criminal background check, a mental health evaluation, and any other specific documents mandated by local statutes and regulations. This approach ensures that the applicant meets all legal prerequisites, demonstrating a commitment to lawful firearm acquisition and adherence to the established regulatory framework. The Puerto Rico Police Bureau is the designated authority responsible for issuing these licenses, and their requirements are paramount. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach would be to submit an application without the mandatory mental health evaluation. This directly contravenes the regulations set forth by the Puerto Rico Police Bureau, which considers mental fitness a critical component of firearm licensing. Failure to provide this evaluation would almost certainly result in the denial of the license. Another incorrect approach would be to omit the criminal background check. Puerto Rico law, like most jurisdictions, requires a thorough background check to ensure that individuals seeking to carry firearms do not have a disqualifying criminal history. Submitting an application without this check demonstrates a disregard for public safety and the legal requirements for responsible gun ownership. A further incorrect approach would be to provide incomplete or falsified personal information on the application. This is not only a violation of the application's terms, but also a serious legal offense that could lead to criminal charges and an immediate denial of the firearm license. Honesty and accuracy are fundamental ethical and legal obligations in this process. Professional reasoning. Professionals involved in assisting applicants with firearm licenses in Puerto Rico should adopt a systematic approach. This begins with thoroughly understanding the latest regulations and requirements published by the Puerto Rico Police Bureau. They should then guide the applicant through each step, ensuring all necessary documents are obtained and correctly completed. Open communication with the applicant about the process and potential challenges is crucial. If there is any uncertainty about a specific requirement, the professional should consult official sources or seek clarification from the relevant authorities rather than making assumptions. The ultimate goal is to facilitate a compliant and successful application process. Question 3. The risk matrix shows a potential for delays in processing firearm license applications in Puerto Rico due to incomplete submissions. Considering the legal framework for obtaining a Licencia de Armas, what is the most prudent and legally compliant approach when an applicant realizes they have inadvertently omitted a required document from their initial submission? Option A. Wait for the Puerto Rico Police Department to contact the applicant regarding the missing document and then provide it. Option B. Assume the omission is minor and proceed with the application, hoping it will not be flagged. Option C. Immediately submit the missing document along with a written explanation to the Puerto Rico Police Department, requesting its inclusion in the pending application. Option D. Resubmit the entire application from scratch, ensuring all documents are included this time. The correct answer is C. Immediately submit the missing document along with a written explanation to the Puerto Rico Police Department, requesting its inclusion in the pending application. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires an individual to navigate the complex and highly regulated process of obtaining a license to carry a firearm in Puerto Rico, balancing personal rights with public safety obligations. Misinterpreting or circumventing the established legal procedures can lead to severe legal consequences, including criminal charges and the denial of the license, and can also compromise public safety. Careful judgment is required to ensure all legal prerequisites are met accurately and honestly. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves diligently and truthfully completing all required application forms, providing all necessary supporting documentation as mandated by Puerto Rico law, and undergoing all stipulated training and background checks. This approach is correct because it directly adheres to the legal framework established by the Puerto Rico Police Department, Policía de Puerto Rico, and the relevant statutes governing firearm licenses. Honesty and completeness in the application process are ethical imperatives and legal requirements, ensuring that only qualified individuals are granted the privilege of carrying a weapon. This aligns with the overarching goal of public safety by ensuring a thorough vetting process. Incorrect approaches analysis. Submitting an incomplete application with missing personal information and failing to disclose a prior minor conviction is professionally unacceptable. This constitutes a direct violation of the application requirements and potentially a misrepresentation of facts, which can lead to the denial of the license and legal penalties. Ethically, it demonstrates a lack of candor and respect for the legal process. Providing only partial documentation and attempting to expedite the process by omitting the mandatory firearm safety course certificate is also professionally unacceptable. This bypasses a critical component of the licensing process designed to ensure responsible firearm handling. It violates specific regulatory requirements for license issuance and undermines public safety by suggesting the applicant is not adequately trained. Submitting an application with fabricated residency information and omitting details about previous firearm training is professionally unacceptable. This involves deliberate deception and misrepresentation, which are serious ethical and legal breaches. Such actions not only disqualify the applicant, but also demonstrate a disregard for the law and the safety of the community. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this situation should employ a systematic approach. First, thoroughly understand all requirements outlined by the Puerto Rico Police Department for a license to carry weapons. Second, gather all necessary documentation and information accurately and honestly. Third, complete the application with utmost diligence, ensuring all fields are filled truthfully and completely. Fourth, schedule and complete all mandatory training and undergo all required background checks. Finally, maintain open communication with the licensing authority if any clarification or additional information is needed. This structured approach ensures compliance with the law and ethical conduct. Question 4. Risk assessment procedures indicate that an applicant is seeking a Puerto Rico license to carry weapons, Licencia de Armas. Which of the following approaches best ensures compliance with Puerto Rico's regulatory framework for firearm licensing and upholds public safety? Option A. A thorough review of the applicant's understanding of Puerto Rico's firearm laws, confirmation of statutory prerequisites, and verification of safe handling and storage knowledge. Option B. An assessment based primarily on the applicant's stated need for self-defense and their general reputation within their community. Option C. A simple confirmation that the applicant has completed a general firearm safety course without further verification of specific Puerto Rico legal requirements. Option D. An evaluation focused on the applicant's perceived trustworthiness and their willingness to follow general firearm safety advice, irrespective of specific legal mandates. The correct answer is A. A thorough review of the applicant's understanding of Puerto Rico's firearm laws, confirmation of statutory prerequisites, and verification of safe handling and storage knowledge. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires an applicant to navigate the specific requirements for obtaining a Puerto Rico license to carry weapons, Licencia de Armas, while demonstrating a thorough understanding of the underlying principles of responsible firearm ownership and public safety. The challenge lies in accurately assessing the applicant's suitability beyond a simple checklist, considering their understanding of legal obligations and potential risks. Careful judgment is required to ensure that only individuals who meet the stringent criteria are granted a license, thereby upholding public safety and the integrity of the licensing process. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a comprehensive evaluation of the applicant's understanding of Puerto Rico's firearm laws, including the specific requirements for obtaining and maintaining a Licencia de Armas. This approach necessitates verifying the applicant's knowledge of legal responsibilities, safe storage practices, and the conditions under which a firearm may be carried. It also requires confirming that the applicant has met all statutory prerequisites, such as age, residency, and the absence of disqualifying criminal history or mental health conditions, as stipulated by Puerto Rico law. This holistic assessment ensures compliance with the spirit and letter of the law, prioritizing public safety. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach would be to solely focus on the applicant's stated intent to own a firearm for self-defense, without delving into their comprehension of the legal framework governing its use and possession in Puerto Rico. This fails to address the critical requirement of legal knowledge and responsible handling, potentially overlooking individuals who may not fully grasp their obligations under the Licencia de Armas regulations. Another incorrect approach would be to prioritize the applicant's perceived character or reputation over a formal verification of their eligibility according to Puerto Rico's established legal criteria. While character is a consideration, it cannot substitute for the mandatory checks and demonstrations of knowledge required by law. This approach risks overlooking disqualifying factors that are legally mandated to be assessed. A further incorrect approach would be to assume that completing a basic firearm safety course automatically qualifies an applicant for a Licencia de Armas, without independently verifying that all specific Puerto Rico statutory requirements have been met. While such courses are valuable, they are often a prerequisite and not the entirety of the licensing process under Puerto Rico law. Professional reasoning. Professionals involved in the licensing process must adopt a systematic approach that begins with a thorough understanding of the specific legal requirements outlined in Puerto Rico's firearm laws. This involves meticulously reviewing all application materials, conducting background checks as mandated, and assessing the applicant's demonstrated knowledge of relevant statutes and regulations. The decision-making process should be guided by a commitment to public safety and adherence to legal mandates, ensuring that each applicant is evaluated fairly and rigorously against the established criteria for a Licencia de Armas. Question 5. The risk matrix shows a moderate likelihood of a firearm being misused by an applicant with a history of domestic disputes, despite their current possession of a valid Puerto Rico license to carry weapons. Considering the regulatory framework for firearm licensing in Puerto Rico, which of the following actions best addresses this situation? Option A. Advise the applicant that their current license is under review and will be revoked due to the reported domestic dispute, without a detailed assessment of the incident's legal implications. Option B. Approve the renewal of the Puerto Rico license to carry weapons without further investigation, as the applicant currently holds a valid license. Option C. Immediately deny the renewal of the Puerto Rico license to carry weapons based on the reported domestic dispute, assuming it inherently makes the applicant unfit. Option D. Conduct a comprehensive review of the applicant's entire history, including the specifics of the domestic dispute, its resolution, and any relevant legal findings, to determine if it constitutes a disqualifying factor under Puerto Rico's weapons licensing laws. The correct answer is D. Conduct a comprehensive review of the applicant's entire history, including the specifics of the domestic dispute, its resolution, and any relevant legal findings, to determine if it constitutes a disqualifying factor under Puerto Rico's weapons licensing laws. Explanation. The risk matrix shows a moderate likelihood of a firearm being misused by an individual with a history of domestic disputes, even if they currently possess a valid Puerto Rico license to carry weapons. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing an individual's legal right to bear arms with the public safety imperative to prevent potential harm. The challenge lies in interpreting the nuances of the law and ethical obligations when presented with concerning, but not definitively disqualifying, information. Careful judgment is required to avoid both unwarranted infringement on rights and potential negligence. The best professional approach involves a thorough review of the applicant's entire history, including any reported incidents or restraining orders, in conjunction with the specific criteria outlined in Puerto Rico's weapons licensing regulations. This approach prioritizes a comprehensive understanding of the applicant's suitability by considering all available information against the legal standards for firearm possession. It acknowledges that, while a past incident may not automatically revoke a license, it warrants closer scrutiny to ensure compliance with the law's intent to promote responsible gun ownership and public safety. This aligns with the ethical duty to protect the public while respecting individual rights. An incorrect approach would be to immediately deny the license solely based on the reported domestic dispute, without a full investigation into the specifics of the incident, its resolution, and whether it constitutes a legal disqualifier under Puerto Rico law. This fails to adhere to the principle of due process and the specific legal grounds for license revocation or denial. Another incorrect approach would be to approve the license without any further inquiry, disregarding the red flags presented by the risk matrix and the reported history. This would represent a failure to exercise due diligence and uphold the public safety aspect of the licensing process. Finally, relying solely on the existence of a current license to dismiss any concerns about past behavior would be a dereliction of duty, as the licensing process is ongoing and requires vigilance. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying potential risks, then systematically gathering all relevant information, comparing that information against established legal criteria, and finally making a reasoned decision based on the totality of the evidence and the specific requirements of Puerto Rico's weapons licensing laws. This process emphasizes thoroughness, fairness, and a commitment to both individual rights and public safety. Question 6. The risk matrix shows a significant increase in applications for concealed carry permits in Puerto Rico, prompting concerns about potential impacts on public safety. As an official responsible for reviewing these applications, which of the following actions best reflects a responsible and legally compliant approach to managing this surge while upholding the rights of applicants under Puerto Rico's weapons licensing framework? Option A. Approve applications based on the applicant's stated intent to use the firearm for lawful purposes, without extensive verification of their personal history or mental fitness. Option B. Expedite the review of applications for individuals who express an urgent need for self-defense, bypassing some standard background checks to process their requests more quickly. Option C. Implement a temporary moratorium on all new concealed carry permit applications due to the increased volume, pending a broader review of the licensing process. Option D. Conduct a thorough background investigation for each applicant, meticulously verifying all required documentation and disqualifying factors, as stipulated by Puerto Rico's Law No. 16 of 2019 and its regulations. Correct answer is D. Conduct a thorough background investigation for each applicant, meticulously verifying all required documentation and disqualifying factors, as stipulated by Puerto Rico's Law No. 16 of 2019 and its regulations. Explanation. The risk matrix shows a potential for increased public safety concerns due to a surge in applications for concealed carry permits in Puerto Rico. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the constitutional right to bear arms with the imperative to ensure public safety and prevent the proliferation of firearms to individuals who may pose a risk. The licensing authority must meticulously assess each applicant's suitability without infringing upon legal rights, demanding a thorough understanding of Puerto Rico's weapons licensing laws and regulations. The best approach involves a comprehensive background investigation that strictly adheres to the requirements outlined in Puerto Rico's Law No. 16 of 2019, Ley de Armas de Puerto Rico, and its associated regulations. This includes verifying the applicant's legal residency, age, mental and physical capacity, and absence of disqualifying criminal convictions or restraining orders. The investigation must also include a thorough review of any submitted documentation, such as psychological evaluations or character references, to ensure their authenticity and relevance. This method is correct because it directly implements the statutory framework designed to safeguard public safety while respecting individual rights, ensuring that only qualified individuals receive a license. An incorrect approach would be to expedite the review process for applicants who claim a pressing need for self-defense without conducting the full background check mandated by law. This fails to uphold the regulatory requirement for a thorough assessment of each applicant's suitability, potentially placing firearms in the hands of individuals who have not met the legal criteria, thereby increasing public safety risks. Another incorrect approach would be to deny licenses based on generalized concerns about an increase in applications, rather than on specific disqualifying factors identified during the investigation of individual applicants. This constitutes an arbitrary application of the law and violates the principle of due process, as individuals are being penalized based on statistical trends rather than their personal qualifications or lack thereof. A further incorrect approach would be to rely solely on the applicant's self-declaration of eligibility without independent verification of key information, such as criminal history or mental health status. This bypasses crucial investigative steps required by Puerto Rico's weapons licensing laws, creating significant loopholes that could be exploited by ineligible individuals. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes adherence to the specific legal requirements of Puerto Rico's weapons licensing laws. This involves a systematic and objective evaluation of each applicant against established criteria, utilizing all available investigative tools and resources. Transparency in the process, coupled with a commitment to fairness and due diligence, is essential to maintaining public trust and ensuring effective implementation of the law. Question 7. The risk matrix shows a moderate likelihood of a firearm being misused by an applicant for a license to carry weapons, Licencia de Armas, in Puerto Rico, stemming from a potentially undisclosed history of domestic violence. Which of the following actions best represents the appropriate response for the licensing authority? Option A. Contact the applicant directly to inquire about any past domestic incidents before proceeding with the application review. Option B. Conduct a thorough background investigation, including verifying all submitted information and cross-referencing with relevant law enforcement databases to identify any disqualifying factors under Puerto Rico law. Option C. Proceed with granting the license, assuming the applicant would have disclosed any relevant history if it existed. Option D. Immediately deny the license application based on the moderate risk indicated in the matrix, without further investigation. The correct answer is B. Conduct a thorough background investigation, including verifying all submitted information and cross-referencing with relevant law enforcement databases to identify any disqualifying factors under Puerto Rico law. Explanation. The risk matrix shows a moderate likelihood of a firearm being misused by an individual with a previously undisclosed history of domestic violence, which could lead to a denial of a license to carry weapons, Licencia de Armas, in Puerto Rico. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a delicate balance between upholding public safety, adhering to the strict legal requirements for firearm permits in Puerto Rico, and ensuring due process for the applicant. The licensing authority must thoroughly investigate all submitted information and conduct necessary background checks without making assumptions or prejudging the applicant. The best approach involves a comprehensive review of the applicant's submitted documentation and a thorough background investigation, including verification of any disclosed or undisclosed history that might be relevant under Puerto Rico's weapons laws. This includes cross-referencing information with law enforcement databases and any other legally permissible sources to identify any disqualifying factors, such as a history of domestic violence, which is a significant consideration under Puerto Rico's regulations for firearm possession and licensing. This meticulous process ensures that decisions are based on objective facts and legal criteria, thereby safeguarding public safety while respecting the applicant's rights. An incorrect approach would be to immediately deny the license based solely on the initial risk assessment without conducting a full investigation. This fails to provide the applicant with due process and may violate their rights if the risk assessment is based on incomplete or inaccurate information. Another incorrect approach is to proceed with granting the license without adequately investigating the potential risk factors identified in the matrix, thereby potentially compromising public safety and violating the spirit and letter of Puerto Rico's weapons control legislation. Finally, attempting to contact the applicant directly to solicit information that should be obtained through official channels or relying on hearsay would be unprofessional and could lead to a flawed decision. Professionals in this field should employ a structured decision-making process that prioritizes thoroughness, adherence to legal mandates, and fairness. This involves 1. Understanding the specific legal framework governing firearm licensing in Puerto Rico. 2. Meticulously reviewing all submitted application materials. 3. Conducting comprehensive background checks using all legally authorized means. 4. Objectively evaluating any identified risk factors against the established legal disqualifiers. And 5. Documenting all findings and the rationale for the final decision. Question 8. Process analysis reveals a firearms dealer in Puerto Rico has a customer attempting to purchase a handgun. The customer presents their license to carry weapons, Licencia de Armas, but upon closer inspection, the dealer notices the expiration date has recently passed. What is the most appropriate and legally compliant course of action for the dealer? Option A. Proceed with the sale, accepting the customer's verbal assurance that they are in the process of renewing their license and will provide proof of renewal shortly. Option B. Advise the customer to select a different firearm for which they may have a different, currently valid authorization, without verifying the status of their primary Licencia de Armas. Option C. Immediately contact the Puerto Rico Police Department, PRPD, to verify the current status of the customer's Licencia de Armas and confirm if it has been renewed or is in the process of renewal with valid interim documentation. Option D. Accept the expired Licencia de Armas as sufficient for the transaction, with the understanding that the customer will provide updated documentation after the sale is completed. Correct answer is C. Immediately contact the Puerto Rico Police Department, PRPD, to verify the current status of the customer's Licencia de Armas and confirm if it has been renewed or is in the process of renewal with valid interim documentation. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a firearms dealer in Puerto Rico who has received a request for a firearm purchase from an individual whose license to carry weapons has recently expired. The core challenge lies in balancing the business imperative to make a sale with the absolute legal and ethical obligation to comply with Puerto Rico's firearms regulations. Failure to adhere to these regulations can result in severe penalties, including license revocation, fines, and criminal charges, while also contributing to the proliferation of firearms to individuals not legally authorized to possess them. This situation demands a meticulous understanding of the Puerto Rico Police Department's PRPD, requirements for firearm sales, and a commitment to upholding public safety. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves immediately verifying the validity of the customer's license to carry weapons, Licencia de Armas, with the Puerto Rico Police Department. This approach is correct because Puerto Rico Law No. 16 of June 1975, as amended, and its subsequent regulations, strictly mandate that a valid Licencia de Armas must be presented and verified before any firearm sale can be completed. The law requires the seller to ensure the purchaser is legally authorized to possess a firearm. By proactively contacting the PRPD, the dealer ensures compliance with the law, prevents an illegal sale, and demonstrates a commitment to responsible firearm sales practices. This aligns with the ethical duty to prevent firearms from falling into unauthorized hands. Incorrect approach is analysis. Proceeding with the sale based on the customer's assurance that they are in the process of renewal is professionally unacceptable. This approach violates Puerto Rico Law No. 16, which requires a currently valid license, not a promise of future renewal. It bypasses the mandatory verification process, directly contributing to a potentially illegal transfer of a firearm. Accepting the expired license as sufficient evidence, with the intention of obtaining proof of renewal later, is also professionally unacceptable. The law does not permit a grace period for expired licenses in the context of a sale. The responsibility rests with the dealer to ensure the license is valid at the time of the transaction. Delaying verification until after the sale creates a situation where a firearm may have already been transferred to an unauthorized individual, suggesting the customer purchase a different firearm for which they might already have authorization, without verifying the current status of their Licencia de Armas for the intended purchase, is professionally unacceptable. While seemingly offering a solution, it still circumvents the legal requirement to verify the purchaser's authorization for the specific firearm being considered. The focus must remain on the validity of the license for the transaction at hand, not on finding loopholes or alternative sales that still require proper authorization. Professional reasoning. Professionals in Puerto Rico dealing with firearm sales must adopt a proactive and compliance-first mindset. When faced with a situation involving a potentially expired license, the decision-making process should involve 1. Identifying the specific legal requirement, valid licensure de armas at the time of sale. 2. Recognizing the potential for non-compliance and its consequences. 3. Prioritizing legal verification over immediate sales. 4. Consulting official channels PRPD for confirmation. 5. Documenting all verification steps. This systematic approach ensures adherence to Puerto Rico's firearms laws and upholds ethical responsibilities. Question 9. The efficiency study reveals that an applicant for a license to carry weapons, licensure de armas, in Puerto Rico has a prior conviction that has been expunged under Puerto Rico law. The applicant asserts that because the record is expunged, they are eligible for the license. What is the most appropriate course of action for the licensing authority in Puerto Rico? Option A. Deny the application solely because of the existence of a prior conviction, regardless of its expunged status, to err on the side of caution. Option B. Conduct a thorough review of the applicant's criminal history, including the expunged conviction, to determine if the nature of the offense, despite expungement, disqualifies them under the specific provisions of Puerto Rico's weapons legislation. Option C. Advise the applicant to seek a judicial order clarifying the impact of the expungement on their eligibility for a licensure de armas in Puerto Rico, without conducting an independent review. Option D. Immediately approve the application based on the applicant's assertion that the expunged conviction no longer legally bars them from obtaining a licensure de armas. The correct answer is B. Conduct a thorough review of the applicant's criminal history, including the expunged conviction, to determine if the nature of the offense, despite expungement, disqualifies them under the specific provisions of Puerto Rico's weapons legislation. Explanation. The efficiency study reveals a critical juncture in the application process for a license to carry weapons, licensure de armas, in Puerto Rico. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a delicate balance between upholding public safety, adhering strictly to the legal requirements of Puerto Rico's weapons laws, and ensuring fair and impartial processing of applications. The applicant's prior conviction, even if expunged under Puerto Rico law, presents a potential risk that must be thoroughly evaluated against the statutory criteria for firearm possession. The professional must navigate the nuances of Puerto Rico's legal framework concerning expunged records and their impact on current licensing eligibility. The best professional approach involves a comprehensive review of the applicant's entire criminal history, including the expunged conviction, and a direct comparison against the specific disqualifying factors outlined in Puerto Rico's weapons legislation. This approach necessitates consulting the relevant sections of the Puerto Rico statutes, e.g., Ley de Armas de Puerto Rico, to determine if the nature of the expunged offense, despite its legal removal from public record, still constitutes a statutory disqualifier for carrying a weapon. The professional must then document this thorough review and the legal basis for their decision, ensuring transparency and accountability. This aligns with the ethical obligation to protect public safety while respecting an individual's rights as defined by Puerto Rico law. An incorrect approach would be to solely rely on the fact that the conviction was expunged, thereby automatically approving the application without further investigation into the nature of the offense and its potential statutory implications under Puerto Rico law. This fails to acknowledge that expungement may not always negate a statutory disqualifier for specific licenses, particularly those related to public safety, like a licensure de armas. Another incorrect approach would be to deny the application solely based on the expunged record, without conducting the required legal analysis to ascertain if it truly disqualifies the applicant under current Puerto Rico statutes. This could lead to an arbitrary denial and potential legal challenge. Finally, an approach that involves seeking informal opinions from colleagues without consulting the official legal statutes and regulations of Puerto Rico would be professionally unsound, as it bypasses the established legal framework and introduces an unacceptable level of subjectivity. Professional reasoning in such situations requires a systematic process. First, identify the core legal question regarding the impact of an expunged record on a Licencia de Armas application under Puerto Rico law. Second, consult the definitive legal sources, the Puerto Rico statutes, and relevant administrative regulations. Third, apply the facts of the applicant's history to the specific legal criteria. Fourth, document the findings and the rationale for the decision meticulously. Finally, communicate the decision clearly and professionally, adhering to all procedural requirements. Question 10. What factors determine the precise total cost for a new license to carry weapons, Licencia de Armas, application in Puerto Rico, and how would an applicant calculate this amount if the base application fee is $100, the background investigation fee is $75, and the license is issued for a period of 3 years, with annual renewal fees of $30? Option A. The total cost is an estimated amount based on typical licensing fees in the Caribbean region, which might be around $220, to account for administrative overhead. Option B. The total cost is the sum of the base application fee, the background investigation fee, and the full renewal fees for the entire 3-year term, calculated as $100 plus $75 plus $30 x 3 equals $265. Option C. The total cost is the sum of the base application fee, the background investigation fee, and the prorated renewal fee for the initial license term, calculated as $100 plus $75 plus $30 for the first year, equals $205. Option D. The total cost is simply the base application fee plus the background investigation fee, totaling $175, as renewal fees are paid separately at a later date. The correct answer is C. The total cost is the sum of the base application fee, the background investigation fee, and the prorated renewal fee for the initial license term, calculated as $100 plus $75 plus $30 for the first year, equals $205. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge in accurately calculating the required fees for a weapon license application in Puerto Rico, specifically involving the interplay of application fees, background check costs, and potential renewal fees. Miscalculating these amounts can lead to application rejection, delays, or financial discrepancies, impacting both the applicant and the licensing authority. Adherence to the specific fee structure outlined by Puerto Rico law is paramount. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a meticulous breakdown of all applicable fees as stipulated by Puerto Rico's weapon licensing regulations. This includes identifying the base application fee, any separate fees for the mandatory background investigation, and considering potential prorated renewal fees if the license is issued for a period less than the full term. The calculation should sum these individual components to arrive at the total required payment. For example, if the application fee is $100, the background check fee is $50, and the license is issued for 2 years with an annual renewal fee of $25, the initial payment would be $100 plus $50 plus $25 for the first year, equals $175. This approach ensures full compliance with the statutory fee requirements, preventing administrative errors and ensuring the application proceeds smoothly. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to only consider the stated application fee without accounting for the separate, mandatory background check fee. This fails to recognize that Puerto Rico law often itemizes these costs, and omitting the background check fee would result in an incomplete payment, leading to application rejection due to noncompliance with the full fee schedule. Another incorrect approach is to estimate the total fee based on past experience or general knowledge of licensing costs, without consulting the current official fee schedule. This is problematic because fee structures can change, and relying on outdated or generalized information can lead to underpayment or overpayment, both of which are professionally unacceptable and can cause administrative complications. A further incorrect approach is to include the full annual renewal fee for the entire potential license term in the initial application payment, even if the license is issued for a partial term. Puerto Rico law typically dictates prorated renewal fees for the initial issuance period. Including the full amount would be an overpayment and could lead to confusion or require a refund process, demonstrating a lack of precise adherence to the fee regulations. Professional reasoning. professionals must adopt a systematic approach to fee calculation. This involves 1. Consulting the most current official fee schedule provided by the Puerto Rico Police Department or relevant licensing authority. 2. Identifying each distinct fee component: application, background check, fingerprinting, etc. 3. Understanding how renewal fees are prorated for initial license issuance. 4. Performing precise arithmetic to sum all required amounts. 5. Verifying the final calculated amount against the official schedule before advising the applicant or submitting payment. This methodical process minimizes errors and ensures strict adherence to legal requirements. Question 11. Compliance review shows that a firearms dealer in Puerto Rico is processing a firearm purchase where the applicant has provided a valid Puerto Rico firearms license, Licencia de Armas, but has omitted their residential address on the purchase application form. The applicant states they will provide this information verbally upon delivery. What is the most appropriate course of action for the dealer to ensure compliance with Puerto Rico's weapons laws? Option A. Inform the applicant that the sale cannot proceed due to the incomplete application and refuse to sell the firearm without further explanation. Option B. Request the applicant to immediately provide the complete residential address in writing to amend the application before proceeding with the sale, and verify its accuracy against their license and other identification. Option C. Proceed with the sale, accepting the applicant's verbal assurance that the address will be provided later, and document this verbal commitment in the sales record. Option D. Accept the application as is, assuming the omission of the address is a minor oversight, and complete the sale, noting the missing information for future reference. The correct answer is B. Request the applicant to immediately provide the complete residential address in writing to amend the application before proceeding with the sale, and verify its accuracy against their license and other identification. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a firearms dealer in Puerto Rico who has received a request for a firearm purchase that appears to be incomplete or potentially fraudulent. The dealer must navigate the legal requirements for firearm sales in Puerto Rico, while also exercising due diligence to prevent illegal transfers. The challenge lies in balancing the right to bear arms with the responsibility to uphold public safety and adhere to strict licensing and registration procedures mandated by Puerto Rico law. Misinterpreting or overlooking any part of the process could lead to severe legal penalties and compromise public safety. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves meticulously verifying all documentation presented by the prospective buyer against the requirements outlined in Puerto Rico's weapons laws and regulations, specifically the Ley de Armas de Puerto Rico, Law No. 168 of 2019, as amended. This includes confirming the validity of the identification, ensuring the applicant possesses a valid Puerto Rico firearms license, Licencia de Armas, and that the firearm being purchased is eligible for transfer and properly registered. If any information is missing or appears inconsistent, the dealer must request clarification and additional documentation from the applicant, adhering strictly to the established procedures for firearm acquisition and transfer. This approach ensures full compliance with Puerto Rico's legal framework for firearm sales, prioritizing lawful acquisition and preventing prohibited transfers. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach would be to proceed with the sale based on a verbal assurance from the applicant that the missing information will be provided later. This fails to comply with the mandatory documentation requirements of Puerto Rico's firearms laws, which necessitate complete and verified information at the point of sale. Such an action could facilitate an illegal firearm transfer and expose the dealer to significant legal liability. Another incorrect approach would be to assume the applicant is acting in good faith and overlook the discrepancy in the application, proceeding with the sale. This demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a failure to adhere to the strict verification protocols mandated by Puerto Rico's firearms regulations. It bypasses essential checks designed to prevent firearms from falling into unauthorized hands. A third incorrect approach would be to refuse the sale outright without clearly articulating the specific legal deficiencies in the application. While caution is necessary, a complete refusal without providing the applicant an opportunity to correct verifiable errors, where legally permissible, might not align with the procedural fairness expected within the regulatory framework, provided the initial request for clarification is made. However, the primary failure here is not in the refusal itself, but in the lack of a structured, legally compliant process for addressing incomplete applications. Professional reasoning. Professionals in firearms sales in Puerto Rico must adopt a systematic approach to every transaction. This involves 1. Thoroughly understanding the current Puerto Rico firearms laws and regulations, including licensing, registration, and transfer requirements. 2. Implementing a checklist for all required documentation and information for every sale. 3. Exercising critical judgment when reviewing applications, looking for any inconsistencies or missing information. 4. Communicating clearly and professionally with applicants, requesting specific missing information or clarification based on legal requirements. 5. Documenting all interactions and decisions made during the transaction. 6. Consulting with legal counsel or relevant authorities if faced with complex or ambiguous situations. This structured decision-making process ensures compliance, protects public safety, and mitigates personal and business risk. Question 12. The assessment process reveals that an applicant in Puerto Rico is preparing to submit their application for a license to carry weapons, Licencia de Armas. They have gathered some documents, but are unsure if they have met all the specific requirements mandated by the Puerto Rico Police Department. Which of the following approaches best ensures a compliant and successful application process? Option A. Submitting an incomplete application with only a portion of the required documentation, such as omitting the certificate of good conduct or proof of firearm proficiency. Option B. Submitting outdated or irrelevant background check information that does not meet the current statutory requirements for a Licencia de Armas in Puerto Rico. Option C. Proactively gathering and submitting all legally mandated documents and information as outlined by the Puerto Rico Police Department's established procedures for a Licencia de Armas, including accurate application forms, proof of identity and residency, background check, certificate of good conduct, and proof of firearm proficiency from an approved course. Option D. Relying solely on verbal assurances from a firearms instructor regarding proficiency without obtaining the formal PRPD-accepted certificate. Correct answer is C. Proactively gathering and submitting all legally mandated documents and information as outlined by the Puerto Rico Police Department's established procedures for a Licencia de Armas, including accurate application forms, proof of identity and residency, background check, certificate of good conduct, and proof of firearm proficiency from an approved course. Explanation. The assessment process reveals a common challenge for individuals seeking a license to carry weapons, Licencia de Armas, in Puerto Rico, navigating the specific requirements and documentation mandated by the Puerto Rico Police Department, PRPD, and relevant statutes. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires meticulous attention to detail, understanding of legal prerequisites, and the ability to accurately interpret and present required evidence. Failure to adhere strictly to these requirements can lead to significant delays, denial of the application, or even legal repercussions. Careful judgment is required to ensure all steps are followed correctly and all documentation is compliant with Puerto Rico law. The best professional approach involves proactively gathering and submitting all legally mandated documents and information as outlined by the Puerto Rico Police Department's established procedures for a Licencia de Armas. This includes, but is not limited to, completing the application form accurately, providing proof of identity and residency, undergoing a background check, submitting a certificate of good conduct, and demonstrating proficiency in firearm safety and handling through an approved course. This approach is correct because it directly aligns with the legal framework governing firearm licensing in Puerto Rico, ensuring that the applicant meets all statutory obligations and departmental requirements. Adhering to these established procedures is the most direct and compliant path to a successful application, minimizing the risk of rejection due to procedural errors or missing documentation. An incorrect approach would be to submit an incomplete application with only a portion of the required documentation, such as omitting the certificate of good conduct or proof of firearm proficiency. This is professionally unacceptable because it directly violates the explicit requirements set forth by Puerto Rico law and PRPD regulations for obtaining a Licencia de Armas. Such an omission demonstrates a lack of diligence and understanding of the legal process, which can lead to the application being denied outright. Another incorrect approach would be to rely solely on verbal assurances from a firearms instructor regarding proficiency without obtaining the formal, PRPD-accepted certificate. This is professionally unacceptable, as it fails to provide the official, verifiable proof of training required by the licensing authority. The PRPD mandates specific documentation, and informal assurances do not meet this legal standard, thus jeopardizing the application's validity. A third incorrect approach would be to submit outdated or irrelevant background check information that does not meet the current statutory requirements for a Licencia de Armas in Puerto Rico. This is professionally unacceptable because the licensing process requires up-to-date and legally compliant background checks to ensure the applicant meets the ongoing criteria for responsible firearm ownership. Using outdated information demonstrates a failure to comply with the dynamic nature of legal requirements and can lead to the application being rejected on grounds of noncompliance with current law. The professional reasoning process for individuals seeking a Licencia de Armas in Puerto Rico should involve a systematic review of the official application guidelines provided by the Puerto Rico Police Department. This includes identifying all required documents, understanding the specific criteria for each document, e.g., validity period for certificates, acceptable training providers, and ensuring that the application is submitted in its entirety and within any specified timeframes. Professionals should prioritize accuracy, completeness, and strict adherence to the legal and regulatory framework of Puerto Rico to ensure a compliant and successful outcome. Question 13. The assessment process reveals that an individual, a legal resident of Puerto Rico, is seeking to obtain a license to carry weapons, Licencia de Armas. They have previously held a similar license in another U.S. state and believe the process will be straightforward. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the regulatory framework for obtaining a firearm license in Puerto Rico? Option A. Presenting a partially completed application to the Puerto Rico Police Bureau and awaiting their request for any missing documents. Option B. Proactively researching and gathering all documentation specifically required by the Puerto Rico Police Bureau, including proof of residency, a valid certificate of good conduct issued in Puerto Rico, and any mandated firearm safety training certificates before submitting a complete application. Option C. Relying on advice from a friend who previously obtained a firearm license in Puerto Rico several years ago without verifying current requirements. Option D. Submitting a copy of their previously obtained firearm license from another U.S. state, assuming it will satisfy the requirements for a license in Puerto Rico. The correct answer is B. Proactively researching and gathering all documentation specifically required by the Puerto Rico Police Bureau, including proof of residency, a valid certificate of good conduct issued in Puerto Rico, and any mandated firearm safety training certificates, before submitting a complete application. Explanation. The assessment process reveals a common challenge for individuals seeking a license to carry weapons, Licencia de Armas, in Puerto Rico, navigating the specific requirements and documentation mandated by the Puerto Rico Police Bureau, Policía de Puerto Rico. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires meticulous attention to detail, adherence to precise legal stipulations, and an understanding of the administrative procedures involved in obtaining such a license. Misinterpreting or overlooking any requirement can lead to significant delays, denial of the application, or even legal repercussions. Careful judgment is required to ensure all steps are followed correctly and all submitted information is accurate and complete. The best professional approach involves a thorough understanding of the Puerto Rico Police Bureau's regulations concerning firearm licensing. This includes proactively identifying and gathering all necessary supporting documents, such as proof of identity, residency, a certificate of good conduct, Certificado de Buena Conducta, and any required training certificates, as stipulated by the relevant sections of the Puerto Rico Weapons Law, Ley de Armas de Puerto Rico. It also entails understanding the specific application forms and submission protocols. This approach is correct because it directly addresses the legal and administrative mandates set forth by the governing authority in Puerto Rico, ensuring compliance and a higher likelihood of successful application. It demonstrates due diligence and respect for the legal framework governing firearm ownership. An incorrect approach would be to assume that a license obtained in another U.S. jurisdiction automatically transfers or that the requirements are identical. This is professionally unacceptable because Puerto Rico has its own specific laws and administrative procedures for firearm licensing, which are distinct from those of any U.S. state. Relying on assumptions or out-of-jurisdiction licenses ignores the explicit regulatory framework of Puerto Rico, leading to a flawed application and potential violation of local laws. Another incorrect approach is to submit an incomplete application with missing documentation, hoping that the Puerto Rico Police Bureau will request the missing items. This is professionally unacceptable as it demonstrates a lack of preparedness and disregard for the established application process. The regulations typically require a complete application package for initial review. Incomplete submissions are often grounds for immediate rejection, wasting both the applicant's time and the administrative resources of the Bureau. A third incorrect approach is to rely solely on informal advice from individuals who may not be fully aware of the current, specific requirements of the Puerto Rico Police Bureau. This is professionally unacceptable because legal and administrative requirements can change, and informal advice may be outdated or inaccurate. The official regulations and guidelines published by the Puerto Rico Police Bureau are the definitive source of information. The professional reasoning process for individuals in this situation should involve 1. Identifying the governing authority, Puerto Rico Police Bureau, and the relevant legislation, Puerto Rico Weapons Law. 2. Consulting the official website or directly contacting the Puerto Rico Police Bureau for the most current and accurate list of requirements and application procedures. 3. Meticulously gathering all specified documentation, ensuring it meets the exact specifications, e.g., validity dates for certificates. 4. Completing the application form accurately and truthfully. 5. Submitting the complete application package according to the prescribed method and timeline. 6. Maintaining copies of all submitted documents for personal records. Question 14. The assessment process reveals that an applicant for a license to carry weapons in Puerto Rico has submitted a completed application form, a certificate of completion for a firearms safety course, and a sworn statement attesting to their good moral character and absence of disqualifying criminal history. However, cursory review of the submitted documents indicates a minor inconsistency in the applicant's residential address between the application form and the safety course certificate. What is the most appropriate course of action for the licensing authority in Puerto Rico? Option A. Deny the application immediately due to the presence of inconsistent information, citing the failure to provide accurate and consistent documentation as a disqualifying factor. Option B. Proceed with the background investigation and license issuance, assuming the minor address discrepancy is an administrative oversight and unlikely to impact the applicant's eligibility. Option C. Forward the application for further review by a supervisor without directly engaging the applicant for clarification, to allow for a higher-level assessment of the discrepancy. Option D. Request clarification from the applicant regarding the discrepancy in the residential address and obtain corrected documentation or a supplementary sworn statement before proceeding with the background investigation and final decision. The correct answer is D. Request clarification from the applicant regarding the discrepancy in the residential address and obtain corrected documentation or a supplementary sworn statement before proceeding with the background investigation and final decision. Explanation. The assessment process reveals a common challenge in Puerto Rico's firearm licensing, balancing the applicant's right to self-defense with the stringent public safety requirements mandated by the Puerto Rico Police Department, PRPD, and the relevant laws governing firearm possession. The professional challenge lies in meticulously verifying all documentation and ensuring compliance with all legal prerequisites without introducing personal bias or overlooking critical details that could compromise public safety or the integrity of the licensing process. A thorough understanding of the Ley de Armas de Puerto Rico, Law No. 168 of 2019, as amended, and its associated regulations is paramount. The best approach involves a systematic and thorough review of all submitted documentation, cross-referencing information with official records where permissible, and ensuring the applicant meets all statutory requirements for obtaining a license to carry weapons in Puerto Rico. This includes verifying age, residency, mental and physical fitness, absence of disqualifying criminal history, and completion of required training. This approach aligns directly with the PRPD mandate to ensure that only qualified individuals are granted firearm licenses, thereby upholding public safety and the rule of law as stipulated by Puerto Rico's firearm regulations. An incorrect approach would be to expedite the process based on a perceived urgency or a personal belief that the applicant is trustworthy, without completing the full verification of all required documents and background checks. This bypasses critical safety protocols and violates the spirit and letter of the law, potentially leading to the issuance of a license to an unqualified individual. Another incorrect approach is to rely solely on the applicant's self-attestation for critical information, such as mental health status or absence of disqualifying convictions, without seeking independent verification through official channels as permitted by law. This introduces a significant risk of misinformation and undermines the due diligence required. Finally, overlooking minor discrepancies in documentation, such as incomplete addresses or slightly mismatched dates, without seeking clarification or correction, demonstrates a lack of diligence and can lead to procedural errors that invalidate the license or create future legal complications. Professionals in this field must adopt a decision-making framework that prioritizes adherence to legal mandates and established procedures. This involves a commitment to thoroughness, accuracy, and impartiality. When faced with an application, the process should be: 1. Confirm all required documentation is present and accurately completed according to Puerto Rico's firearm licensing regulations. 2. Independently verify critical information through official sources where legally permissible. 3. Assess the applicant's eligibility against all statutory criteria, including background checks and training requirements. 4. Document every step of the process meticulously. 5. Seek clarification or additional information from the applicant or relevant authorities when any doubt or discrepancy arises. This systematic approach ensures both compliance and public safety. Question 15. The assessment process reveals that an applicant for a license to carry weapons, Licencia de Armas, in Puerto Rico has a prior arrest from several years ago, for which the charges were subsequently dropped. The applicant is unsure whether to disclose this arrest on their application, believing it might negatively impact their chances of obtaining the license. Considering Puerto Rico's firearms regulations, which of the following approaches best ensures compliance and a professional outcome? Option A. Disclose the prior arrest but only mention that it occurred without specifying the outcome of the charges to avoid potential negative perceptions. Option B. Seek to have the arrest record expunged before applying, and if unsuccessful, then omit it from the application. Option C. Fully disclose the prior arrest and the fact that the charges were dropped to the Puerto Rico Police Department as part of the application, providing any requested supporting documentation. Option D. Omit the prior arrest from the application, assuming that since the charges were dropped, it is not a disqualifying factor and therefore not relevant to disclose. The correct answer is C. Fully disclose the prior arrest and the fact that the charges were dropped to the Puerto Rico Police Department as part of the application, providing any requested supporting documentation. Explanation. The assessment process reveals a common challenge for individuals seeking a license to carry weapons, Licencia de Armas, in Puerto Rico, navigating the nuances of the application process and understanding the implications of prior legal encounters. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a thorough understanding of Puerto Rico's specific firearms regulations, particularly Law No. 16 of 2019, Ley de Armas de Puerto Rico, and the ability to apply these laws to a unique personal history. The applicant's prior arrest, even if charges were dropped, introduces a critical element that must be addressed accurately and transparently to comply with legal requirements and avoid misrepresentation. Careful judgment is required to ensure the applicant provides complete and truthful information, as any omission or misstatement can have severe consequences, including denial of the license and potential legal repercussions. The best professional approach involves proactively and truthfully disclosing the prior arrest and the outcome of the charges to the Puerto Rico Police Department, Policía de Puerto Rico, as part of the application process. This approach aligns with the spirit and letter of Law No. 16 of 2019, which mandates full disclosure of any criminal history, including arrests, regardless of whether charges were ultimately filed or dismissed. Transparency is paramount in firearms licensing. By providing all relevant information, the applicant demonstrates honesty and respect for the legal process, allowing the authorities to conduct a comprehensive background check and make an informed decision based on all available facts. This proactive disclosure is crucial for establishing credibility and fulfilling the applicant's legal obligation to provide accurate information. An incorrect approach would be to omit the prior arrest from the application, assuming that because the charges were dropped, it is not relevant. This failure to disclose is a direct violation of the application requirements under Law No. 16 of 2019, which requires reporting all arrests. Such an omission constitutes misrepresentation and can lead to the denial of the license and potential criminal charges for providing false information on a government application. Another incorrect approach would be to only disclose the arrest without providing the outcome, charges dropped, leaving the information incomplete. While better than complete omission, this still fails to provide the full picture required by the authorities and could lead to unnecessary delays or further investigation, potentially impacting the application negatively. Finally, attempting to downplay the significance of the arrest or providing misleading information about the circumstances would also be an unacceptable and unethical approach, as it undermines the integrity of the application process and demonstrates a lack of candor. Professionals guiding applicants through this process should adopt a framework that prioritizes absolute honesty and thoroughness. This involves educating the applicant on the specific disclosure requirements of Puerto Rico's firearms laws, meticulously reviewing the application for completeness and accuracy, and advising the applicant to err on the side of providing more information rather than less when in doubt. The decision-making process should always center on compliance with the law and ethical conduct, ensuring that the applicant understands the gravity of their disclosures and the potential consequences of any misrepresentation. Question: the assessment process reveals that an applicant for a license to carry weapons, Licencia de Armas, in Puerto Rico, has a prior arrest from several years ago, for which the charges were subsequently dropped. The applicant is unsure whether to disclose this arrest on their application, believing it might negatively impact their chances of obtaining the license. Considering Puerto Rico's firearms regulations, which of the following approaches best ensures compliance and a professional outcome? Options: A. Fully disclose the prior arrest and the fact that the charges were dropped to the Puerto Rico Police Department as part of the application, providing any requested supporting documentation. B. Omit the prior arrest from the application, assuming that since the charges were dropped, it is not a disqualifying factor and therefore not relevant to disclose. C. Disclose the prior arrest but only mention that it occurred without specifying the outcome of the charges to avoid potential negative perceptions. D. Seek to have the arrest record expunged before applying, and if unsuccessful, then omit it from the application. Question 16. The assessment process reveals an applicant for a Puerto Rico license to carry weapons has a history of minor altercations and a past arrest for disorderly conduct that did not result in a conviction. Which of the following approaches best demonstrates professional adherence to Puerto Rico's regulatory framework for firearm licensing? Option A. Forward the application to the Puerto Rico Police Department for an immediate discretionary denial based on the reported incidents, without independently verifying the completeness or accuracy of the applicant's provided information. Option B. Conduct a thorough review of all submitted documentation, including official criminal and mental health records, and assess the nature of the past arrest and altercations in the context of Puerto Rico's statutory definitions of disqualifying factors and the requirement for good character, while ensuring the applicant is afforded due process. Option C. Immediately approve the license based on the applicant's assertion of good character and the absence of a conviction for the disorderly conduct charge, as minor altercations are not explicitly listed as disqualifying offenses. Option D. Deny the license based on the arrest for disorderly conduct and the reported altercations, assuming these incidents inherently demonstrate a lack of good character, without further investigation or consideration of the applicant's right to respond. The correct answer is B. Conduct a thorough review of all submitted documentation, including official criminal and mental health records, and assess the nature of the past arrest and altercations in the context of Puerto Rico's statutory definitions of disqualifying factors and the requirement for good character, while ensuring the applicant is afforded due process. Explanation: the assessment process reveals a common challenge for individuals seeking a Puerto Rico license to carry weapons. navigating the nuanced requirements for demonstrating good character and the absence of disqualifying factors. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a thorough understanding of Puerto Rico's specific legal definitions of disqualifying offenses and the procedural mechanisms for verifying an applicant's background, balancing the applicant's rights with public safety concerns. A superficial review or reliance on assumptions can lead to incorrect determinations. The best professional approach involves a meticulous examination of all submitted documentation, including criminal history records, mental health evaluations, and any supporting affidavits, to ensure strict compliance with Puerto Rico Law No. 164 of August 11, 2015, Ley de Armas de Puerto Rico, and its subsequent amendments. This approach prioritizes verifying that the applicant meets all statutory requirements, specifically focusing on the absence of convictions for crimes that, under Puerto Rico law, automatically disqualify an individual from obtaining a license. This includes a thorough review of any past incidents, regardless of whether they resulted in a conviction, to assess if they indicate a propensity for violence or a disregard for the law, as interpreted by the Puerto Rico Police Department and the courts. The process must be objective, evidence-based, and strictly adhere to the legal definitions and criteria established by the governing statutes. An approach that relies solely on an applicant's self-declaration of good character, without independent verification of their criminal and mental health history, is professionally unacceptable. This fails to meet the statutory mandate for thorough background checks and exposes the public to potential risks. Similarly, an approach that dismisses past incidents solely because they did not result in a formal conviction, without considering their relevance to the applicant's suitability to possess a firearm under Puerto Rico law, is flawed. Puerto Rico law allows for consideration of certain behaviors that may not have led to a conviction, but demonstrate a lack of good character or a propensity for violence. Finally, an approach that prematurely denies a license based on unsubstantiated rumors or hearsay, without providing the applicant an opportunity to respond or present evidence, violates due process and ethical standards. Professionals in this field must adopt a systematic decision-making process. This begins with a comprehensive understanding of Puerto Rico's Ley de Armas. Next, they must meticulously review all submitted application materials against the statutory criteria. Any discrepancies or potential disqualifying factors must be thoroughly investigated through official channels. The applicant should be afforded due process, including notification of any concerns and an opportunity to provide clarification or rebuttal. The final decision must be based on objective evidence and a strict interpretation of Puerto Rico law, ensuring both public safety and fairness to the applicant. Question 17. Market research demonstrates a growing interest among residents of Puerto Rico in obtaining a license to carry a weapon for personal protection. An individual residing in San Juan seeking to understand the correct procedure for this. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the regulatory framework for obtaining a license to carry weapons in Puerto Rico? Option A. Rely on advice from social media groups dedicated to firearm ownership in Puerto Rico, as they often share practical tips and shortcuts. Option B. Submit an application with incomplete information and hope that the authorities will contact the applicant for any missing details to expedite the process. Option C. Thoroughly research and comply with all specific eligibility criteria, application procedures, required documentation, and any mandatory training or evaluations as stipulated by the laws and regulations of Puerto Rico, consulting official sources for accuracy. Option D. Assume the licensing requirements are the same as those in the state of Florida, as it is a common destination for Puerto Rican residents, and follow those procedures. The correct answer is C. Thoroughly research and comply with all specific eligibility criteria, application procedures, required documentation, and any mandatory training or evaluations as stipulated by the laws and regulations of Puerto Rico, consulting official sources for accuracy. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual to navigate the specific legal requirements for obtaining a license to carry a weapon in Puerto Rico, balancing personal rights with public safety obligations. Misunderstanding or misapplying the regulations can lead to severe legal consequences, including criminal charges and the denial of fundamental rights. Careful judgment is required to ensure all procedural and substantive requirements are met accurately and ethically. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves diligently researching and adhering to the specific requirements outlined in Puerto Rico's laws and regulations governing the issuance of a license to carry weapons. This includes understanding the eligibility criteria, the application process, the necessary documentation, background checks, and any mandatory training or psychological evaluations mandated by the Puerto Rico Police Department or other relevant authorities. This approach is correct because it directly aligns with the legal framework established by the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico, ensuring compliance and upholding the principles of responsible firearm ownership and public safety as defined by local law. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach is to assume that the process for obtaining a license to carry a weapon in Puerto Rico is identical to that in the mainland United States or any other jurisdiction. This is a significant regulatory failure because Puerto Rico has its own distinct legal system and specific statutes, e.g., Ley de Armas de Puerto Rico, that govern firearm licensing. Relying on external regulations would lead to noncompliance with local laws, potentially resulting in the application being rejected or facing legal penalties. Another incorrect approach is to rely solely on informal advice from friends or online forums, without verifying the information with official sources. This is an ethical and regulatory failure because such advice may be outdated, inaccurate, or not applicable to the specific circumstances of Puerto Rico. It bypasses the established legal channels for obtaining accurate information and can lead to critical errors in the application process, jeopardizing the applicant's eligibility and potentially violating the law. Further incorrect approach is to attempt to expedite the process by omitting required documentation or misrepresenting information on the application. This is a severe ethical and regulatory failure. It constitutes fraud and dishonesty, directly violating the integrity of the licensing process and undermining public trust. Such actions would not only lead to the immediate denial of the license, but also carry significant legal repercussions under Puerto Rico law. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such situations should adopt a systematic decision-making process. First, identify the specific jurisdiction and the relevant governing laws and regulations. Second, consult official government sources, e.g., the Puerto Rico Police Department website, official legal statutes for accurate and up-to-date information. Third, if necessary, seek guidance from legal counsel or authorized licensing agencies. Fourth, meticulously follow all procedural steps and provide truthful and complete information. Finally, maintain a commitment to ethical conduct and legal compliance throughout the entire process. Question 18. Benchmark analysis indicates that when an individual who holds a valid Puerto Rico license to carry weapons, Licencia de Armas, reports significant changes in their personal circumstances, such as a recent arrest for a non-violent offense that was subsequently dismissed, or a change in their mental health status that has been professionally managed and stabilized. What is the most appropriate course of action for the licensing authority in Puerto Rico? Option A. Grant the renewal based on the applicant's past record of responsible firearm ownership, assuming that any new issues are temporary and do not fundamentally alter their suitability. Option B. Conduct a comprehensive review of the applicant's updated circumstances against the current eligibility requirements of Puerto Rico's Ley de Armas, including any applicable regulations or departmental procedures for license renewal and requalification, to determine continued eligibility. Option C. Automatically renew the license as long as the applicant asserts they still require a firearm for self-defense and the previous license has not expired. Option D. Deny the renewal application immediately upon notification of any new arrest, regardless of the outcome or the nature of the offense, to err on the side of caution. The correct answer is B. Conduct a comprehensive review of the applicant's updated circumstances against the current eligibility requirements of Puerto Rico's Ley de Armas, including any applicable regulations or departmental procedures for license renewal and requalification, to determine continued eligibility. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge involving the interpretation and application of Puerto Rico's firearm licensing laws in a situation where an individual's circumstances have changed significantly since their initial license was granted. The core difficulty lies in balancing the applicant's right to possess a firearm for self-defense with the public safety mandate inherent in firearm regulation. Professionals must exercise careful judgment to ensure compliance with the law while upholding ethical responsibilities. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a thorough review of the applicant's updated circumstances against the specific requirements outlined in Puerto Rico's Law Number 16 of January 23, 1973, as amended, Ley de Armas de Puerto Rico. This includes re-evaluating their eligibility based on any new criminal history, mental health evaluations, or changes in residency that might affect their qualification. The process must strictly adhere to the procedures for license renewal and requalification, as stipulated by the Puerto Rico Police Department, Policía de Puerto Rico, and relevant judicial precedents. This approach is correct because it directly addresses the legal mandate to ensure that all license holders continue to meet the statutory criteria for possessing a firearm, thereby prioritizing public safety and legal compliance. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach would be to assume that a previously issued license automatically remains valid without any re-verification, especially when significant life changes are reported. This fails to acknowledge the dynamic nature of firearm licensing and the legal obligation to ensure ongoing eligibility. It bypasses the regulatory framework that requires periodic review and requalification, potentially allowing individuals who no longer meet the criteria to retain their licenses, which is a direct violation of the spirit and letter of the Ley de Armas. Another incorrect approach would be to grant the renewal solely based on the applicant's assertion of continued need for self-defense, without conducting the necessary due diligence to verify their current eligibility. This overlooks the legal requirements for demonstrating fitness and good moral character, which are not static. It prioritizes the applicant's subjective claim over objective legal standards and public safety considerations, thereby undermining the regulatory process. A further incorrect approach would be to deny the renewal summarily based on a past, unrelated incident that has been legally resolved and is not a disqualifying factor under current Puerto Rico law, without a comprehensive review of the applicant's current situation. This demonstrates a lack of understanding of the specific disqualifying criteria and the principles of rehabilitation, potentially leading to an arbitrary and unlawful denial of a license. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this field must adopt a systematic approach. First, they should identify the specific legal provisions in Puerto Rico's Ley de Armas that govern license renewals and requalification. Second, they must gather all relevant information regarding the applicant's updated circumstances, including any new documentation or reports. Third, they should compare this information against the statutory requirements, paying close attention to any changes that might impact eligibility. Finally, they must make a decision based on a strict interpretation of the law and established procedures, ensuring that their actions are both legally sound and ethically responsible, prioritizing public safety while respecting individual rights within the legal framework. Question 19. The assessment process reveals an applicant for a Puerto Rico license to carry weapons has a history of minor altercations and has expressed a general concern for personal safety due to neighborhood crime. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the regulatory framework for firearms licensing in Puerto Rico? Option A. Deny the license solely based on the applicant's history of minor altercations, without further investigation into the circumstances or current suitability. Option B. Conduct a thorough background investigation, including a review of criminal records, mental health evaluations if indicated, and corroboration of the applicant's stated concerns, to objectively determine suitability for a license. Option C. Issue the license based on the applicant's stated concerns for personal safety and their assurance that they will use the firearm responsibly. Option D. Rely on the recommendation of a close friend of the applicant who attests to their good character, bypassing a formal background check. The correct answer is B. Conduct a thorough background investigation, including a review of criminal records, mental health evaluations if indicated, and corroboration of the applicant's stated concerns, to objectively determine suitability for a license. Explanation. The assessment process reveals a common challenge in the application for a Puerto Rico license to carry weapons, balancing the applicant's right to seek a license with the stringent public safety requirements mandated by Puerto Rico law. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a nuanced understanding of the legal framework, the ability to discern genuine threats from potential ones, and the ethical imperative to uphold public safety without infringing on individual rights. A thorough review of the applicant's history, coupled with an objective assessment of their current circumstances, is paramount. The best approach involves a comprehensive and objective evaluation of the applicant's background, focusing on any documented history of violence, mental instability, or substance abuse that could pose a risk to public safety. This includes a diligent review of all submitted documentation, corroboration of information where possible, and adherence to the specific investigative procedures outlined by the Puerto Rico Police Department, Policía de Puerto Rico, and relevant statutes governing firearms. This approach is correct because it directly aligns with the legislative intent behind firearm licensing, which is to permit responsible citizens to carry firearms while rigorously preventing those who pose a danger to themselves or others from obtaining them. The Puerto Rico Firearms Act, Ley de Armas de Puerto Rico, and associated regulations emphasize a thorough vetting process, requiring applicants to demonstrate good character and a lack of disqualifying conditions, an approach that prioritizes the applicant's stated desire for self-defense without conducting a thorough background check would be professionally unacceptable. This fails to meet the statutory requirement to assess the applicant's suitability and could lead to the issuance of a license to an individual who poses a significant risk. Similarly, an approach that relies solely on the applicant's personal testimony or the endorsement of a single acquaintance without independent verification or a review of official records would be deficient. This bypasses crucial investigative steps designed to uncover potential disqualifiers and undermines the integrity of the licensing process. Furthermore, an approach that dismisses concerns raised by law enforcement or community members without proper investigation would be ethically and legally unsound, as it neglects potential indicators of risk that are vital for public safety. Professionals in this field must employ a systematic decision-making process. This involves first understanding the specific legal requirements of Puerto Rico's Firearms Act. Second, they must gather all relevant information, including official records, background checks, and any submitted evidence. Third, they must objectively analyze this information against the established legal criteria for license eligibility. Finally, they must make a determination based on the totality of the evidence, prioritizing public safety while respecting the rights of the applicant and documenting the entire process meticulously. Question 20. Strategic planning requires a precise financial assessment for obtaining a license to carry weapons, Licencia de Armas, in Puerto Rico. If the initial application fee is $100, the background investigation fee is $50, and fingerprinting services cost $25, what is the total amount of funds that must be prepared to cover all these mandatory expenses at the time of application submission, assuming these are the only fees required? Option A, $150, Option B, $175, Option C, $100, Option D, $125. The correct answer is B, $175. Explanation. Strategic planning requires careful consideration of various factors when applying for a license to carry weapons, Licencia de Armas, in Puerto Rico. This scenario is professionally challenging because it demands a precise understanding of the application process, including the financial implications and the specific documentation required by Puerto Rico law. Misinterpreting these requirements can lead to significant delays, rejection of the application, and potential legal complications. Professionals must navigate these complexities with accuracy and adherence to the law. The correct approach involves accurately calculating the total fees associated with the application process, including the initial application fee, fingerprinting costs, and any required background check fees, and ensuring these funds are readily available. This approach is correct because it directly addresses the financial prerequisites mandated by Puerto Rico's regulations for obtaining a firearm license. Specifically, Puerto Rico law, as outlined in the Weapons Law of Puerto Rico, Ley de Armas de Puerto Rico, specifies various fees that must be paid at different stages of the application. For instance, there is a fee for the application itself, a fee for the background investigation conducted by the Puerto Rico Police Department, and potentially fees for fingerprinting services. Accurately budgeting for and having these funds prepared ensures compliance with these explicit financial obligations, preventing the application from being stalled or rejected due to insufficient payment. An incorrect approach involves assuming that only the initial application fee is required and neglecting to budget for ancillary costs such as background checks and fingerprinting. This is professionally unacceptable because it demonstrates a failure to thoroughly research and understand the complete financial obligations stipulated by Puerto Rico's weapons law. Such an oversight can lead to an incomplete application, as payment for mandatory services is a prerequisite for processing. Another incorrect approach is to underestimate the total cost by only considering the base application fee and assuming that other fees will be communicated later or can be paid on demand. This is professionally unacceptable as it shows a lack of due diligence in preparing for the application process. Puerto Rico's regulations, like those in many jurisdictions, require all associated fees to be submitted with or at specific points during the application process. Delaying payment or failing to anticipate these costs can result in the application being deemed incomplete and subsequently denied. A further incorrect approach is to rely on outdated information regarding the fee structure, leading to an insufficient amount of funds being prepared. This is professionally unacceptable because it highlights a failure to consult the most current official fee schedules or legal requirements. Fee structures can change, and professionals have an ethical and legal obligation to ensure they are working with the most up-to-date information to comply with current regulations. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a systematic approach. First, thoroughly research the specific legal requirements for the license, including all associated fees and documentation. Second, consult official sources, such as the Puerto Rico Police Department's Firearms Division or relevant legal statutes, for the most current fee schedule. Third, create a detailed budget that accounts for all anticipated costs. Finally, ensure that all necessary funds are readily available before submitting the application to avoid any procedural delays or rejections.